Welcome to the Nerd Party.
A Doctor Who podcast. I'm Jessica Nunn.
And I'm her husband and co-host, Phillip Gilfus. Well, as promised last week, we are returning to the world of animated Second Doctor era.
Yes.
As folks know, we have many lost episodes in the First and Second Doctor era, and luckily they are animating them to make them complete stories based on the surviving audio.
And the pictures, I assume.
Exactly. The telesnaps, as they say in the business. And so we're going to be looking at the Second Doctor story, Fury from the Deep. This is the penultimate serial from Season 5. And this first aired on 16 March 1968. And here on Time and Space, we've gotten into the practice of when there's an animated Second Doctor serial where the companion leaves, we call on Richard Carrier. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it is becoming a theme, isn't it? Slightly better farewell story for a companion, this one.
Exactly. And a second Doctor animated serial where the companion leaves, and there's a one-in poster of the Master.
Yes.
That's your niche.
Yeah, although, on that note, while we mention it, I like that little treasure egg in Faceless Ones, but this one I thought it didn't make sense to me, because why would they have a wanted poster inside a gas refinery? I don't know. Maybe they were worried that Master might show up and have a nefarious scheme to take over the gas facility. I don't know.
I mean, to be fair, if the Doctor shows up randomly, the
well,
Master could as well.
Far behind,
yeah.
Even if he hasn't. Well, let's get into it. I figure we'll talk about the actual story first, and then we can get into the more meta, animated, etc. elements to it. Because we did just get watching. One thing about these Blu-rays, or however you're purchasing these, is we're always interested in the extras, and we did get a nice featurette that we saw with Fraser Hines and some other folks involved revisiting. So that was nice to see. But yeah, so getting to the actual story, I remember, Richard, when I saw an article months ago, though I'm sure it was longer than that when this project actually started, but coming next, Fury from the Deep, and the article was like, it's not the greatest story. I'm like, you're not really pitching this very well. I mean, it was kind of like, okay. But anyway, watching it, I don't know, Jessica, what did you think of Fury from the Deep?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. It wasn't a story that completely grabbed me. But then watching the featurette, as you said, I found it really interesting. The idea that it was, at these actual anti-aircraft places, and they're wandering around in the ocean, and there's a helicopter and a crazy helicopter driver, and so yeah, I imagine that live, particularly during that time, it may have been more riveting than we found it now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think in a way it's sort of it's a classic story in the sense that it has, like certain classics have, all the sort of ingredients that go into making that kind of era. In a way, it is a classic base under siege. Unfortunately, it's preceded by one and followed by another one. So, week to week, over those several weeks, it would have got a bit samey. But I think everyone at the time watching would have recognised the format for what it was. This is definitely much Troughton's era settling into a kind of a groove or a rut, if you want to see it that way. I think there's some interesting ideas in it. I think which might be somewhat lost on us today, especially abroad, because around this time, I know that, I have it. It's not really close to my heart as such, but I grew up in a small ex-Victorian seaside town, where during the 60s and 70s, all the local industry economy just collapsed because, like shown in the Faceless ones, everyone used to get package trips, cheap package holidays to Spain and elsewhere. So no one wanted to go to rickety roller coasters on the coast anymore and have a donkey ride in the rain. So a lot of people lost their livelihoods. And this was the era when my parents were growing up. So my dad, after he left the RAF, got a job, the new industry, which was really revitalised, at least the fortunes of individuals who lived in these towns, which was working for offshore oil and gas companies, and that's what my dad went to do. So he was frequently away in the North Sea on oil rigs, on gas rigs, and places like that, checking the pipes and things. So this is sort of close to home in a sense for me. And it was all new when this story came, because I think for about 100 years up to then, gas in England, in the UK, was produced by burning coal. So it was quite dirty and very dangerous and also really toxic. So in this story, a few times they mention how the natural gas isn't toxic. It's so much safer. And because of that, the government had this big push to convert every house to run off natural gas that had been discovered in the North Sea. And what that meant was that strange little men in overalls used to show up at your house and convert your house. And everyone was very some people were quite suspicious of what their motives were. Were they actually burglars pretending? And I think that's the origin, in a way, of in the story, in that kind of Doctor Who tradition of making something familiar unfamiliar and a bit scary, where you've got the characters of Oak and Quill who come into her house and they've got the overalls on and they turn out to emit this this sort of mind-controlling gas to incapacitate her and things like that. So I like the little topical elements, a bit like in the Faceless ones with the package holidays, that give. I think at the time it would have taken like Doctor Who tends to do, even today, like with say what off the top of my head, like the Bells of St. John, takes the sort of the Wi-Fi and everyone gets lost in the Wi-Fi and things like that. It takes a running thing and sort of twists it to make it something sort of interesting and spooky, while still fitting into that kind of template of Doctor Who.
I'll probably get the title wrong. Is it the Idiot's Lantern? Was it the Charles Dickens one with the now they're using the gas lamps?
Yeah, that was the Unquiet Dead with they live in the gas. Yeah, the Charles Dickens. Yeah, and the Idiot's Lantern in a way is sort of similar to that, but being Mark Gatiss, it's about 50 years out of date, because that's like the fear of the television and the idiot box, which was something very, at the time, when the grandma. And it's funny that you mentioned that, actually, because if I remember rightly, I can't remember her name, but the grandma who loses her face in the Idiot's Lantern watching the television, who's worried about them, it will rot your brains and all that, like people used to say. She's actually the woman. It's the same actress who plays the director of the company in Fury from the Deep, who shows up about halfway through to sort of take charge. It's the same lady, so there's a little coincidence for you.
It was just to stick on that for a second, and I don't know, just because I think about these things, because this was. I know, just at the year 5 seconds.
68.
Yeah, 68. I was just like, would it be unusual to show a woman in charge?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's not entirely clear in the show whether she's they call her the director. I don't think she's supposed to be the director of the whole company, but she's certainly supposed to be the director of the project. And I think that's kind of indicates the fact that it's never explicitly said in the original story, and we'll talk about the animation separately. But the idea is this is supposed to be set a little bit into the future. Right. And the general fan-received wisdom is that this is set in mid-1970s. But that's very much an afterthought, and it's got to do with the fact that would then fit in quite neatly with the John Pertwee era and the unit stories, which this is very much a kind of a precursor of. And also might explain why there's the Roger Delgado poster. But I think in the animation there is a calendar early on in episode 1 that has 1975 written on it. But there's some debate. It's not explicitly said when it's set. The boss, the head guy, I've completely forgotten his name now, Robson. He says that he's had 30 years experience in the business, which if he'd only worked on British oil and gas rigs would mean that it would actually be set in the 1990s, which I think is a bit of a stretch for the technology for us now. But, yeah, I mean, he could have worked abroad or worked on some of the other oil and gas refineries. But the general received wisdom is it's in the mid-70s, but it was certainly meant to be in the near future. So that's why I think that, yeah, they have, like, you know, a lady being in a position of power in a little bit like, I suppose, like a Star Trek sense of, you know, trying to indicate that it's futuristic by having social roles mixed up a little bit. You know,
the American trope, which I guess, you know, no longer would exist, but, you know, in the apocalypse movies of the 90s, you could tell it was the future because it was a black president. You know, when it was Morgan Freeman or something. And
yes, yeah.
No longer.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Although there are totally times when the men are like, shh, we're talking in this episode to the directors.
Yeah.
Well, talking about the monsters for a moment, well, I mean, what'd you think of Foam and Weed? When they kept saying,
I thought it was a great 70s band.
You know, but when they kept saying, we're under the control of the weed, I'm like, that's something different. But anyway. But it did make me wonder because, of course, I mean, we just watched the animated. It did seem like we saw a few pictures, but like I don't know how well this worked. I mean, I don't know. I suppose back then the television was smaller, black and white. A lot of imagination was going on. But I'm like, in other words, like especially with the helicopter scenes, I don't know what it looked like for real. Because in the animated, they have these huge weeds, you know, grabbing the helicopter. I'm like, there's no way they did that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. That there is quite a bit in the last two episodes of artistic license, which I don't think does the story any harm. I think it improves upon it. But if you were like a real purist with this, is it an exact representation as close as possible? I think you'd be quite up in arms about that, and maybe some people are. I don't follow these people like that. But as far as I know, because I believe Patrick Troughton was quite. He was definitely not a Harrison Ford type who'd throw himself into his stunts or anything. And fair enough. So he certainly didn't control any of the helicopter business and didn't really like going up in it. I don't think Fraser Hines had any issue, and I haven't seen that special feature yet, but I do know from a previous thing that the one concern with that was his kilt being blown up. And I don't know if they mentioned this at all. So they did weight down his kilt with little like lead bits they sewed into the bottom of his kilt to make sure, because that would be very rude.
Yeah, no, in the featurette they do talk to the pilot, the helicopter pilot,
who's called Mad Mike.
Yes,
of course.
And he's and I can't remember sort of the main character. I mean, Fraser Hines is there, but sort of the main character, and whose name escapes me for the featurette, is one of the producer assistants or something.
Yeah,
I'm getting his title wrong. But anyway, he's the one who did all the site selection, who helped all the story and everything like that. He seems very nice. But anyway, yeah, he was talking about meeting the pilot because he's the one who found the site and who then went and did a recce of the site, as he says. And eventually, as you said, of course, it's just the helicopter pilot who does the helicopter. Like, the second doctor doesn't know how to fly, but he was getting him to do all sorts of things. The pilot, because he flew in between the towers, and he was in the featurette. He's like, I can't believe you did that, and the guy's like, it's like driving a car. It's like, what are you talking about?
If it were dangerous,
I think
for a lot of
the. For a lot of like the reaction shots of when they're in the cockpit, I think the helicopter was flying quite low, sort of hovering low, and they did a lot of zoom in, zoom out, kind of quick footage to make it sort of exciting. But that whole bit in the animation where they're sort of dodging the giant tendrils of weed coming out of the sea is all sort of artistic license, because in the original that whole sequence is basically it's a bit of a side story really of the Doctor failing really badly to fly this helicopter and nearly crashing. Ooh. So all of that sequence, which is quite extended, would have been in the original, him sort of flying about, trying not to hit the walls until the other helicopter pilot gets on the radio and tells him how to fly. But I kind of prefer how it is in that, because you still get that bit in the animation at the start where he doesn't know how to fly, and then you get them dodging the weed. And I think that might be a little bit of a reference to there was obviously most of classic Doctor Who was novelised by Target novels across the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And Fury from the Deep novelization was like a bumper one, so it was they couldn't cut it down, so they released a slightly larger novel than the others, and it's quite beloved because it really expands, I think, on a lot. I haven't had the joy of reading it yet, but I know that the front cover, the drawing on it is an oil rig, and it has this big piece of weed coming out of the sea. So I think in the animation that might be a little bit of a kind of a fan recreation in a way of what that would be like. The other thing that there's a bit of artistic license to, although it's less clear, is the actual, at the end we actually see sort of like individual weed monsters coming out. I don't believe there was anything like that in the story. I think it was more, I mean, that the footage and the shots that we have show a hell of a lot of foam.
More foam
as
than
you
weed.
get, and actually that's another trope for that season in particular. I think someone at the BBC had acquired a foam machine, and this hadn't really been used much before, and it appears about 4 or 5 times across a series of Troughton stories, and this, to my mind, is the only one where it really works, because you do get sea foam. But there's in the following year there's a load of foam in the Seeds of Doom with the Ice Warriors. Or is it the Seeds of Death? I always get those two mixed up. That's a Tom Baker story. It's one of those with Ice Warriors in, and there's loads of foam randomly. But this one it worked, and there's lots of that thrown about, which I think to a modern eye, or certainly to me, it's a bit... I think it worked in the animation, but when you see the telesnaps with the foam on, it is literally the kind of foam machine that you get at sort of early 2000s nightclubs.
I yelled foam party every time.
Every time. It was delightful. It was a lot of fun for everybody.
And they would have sort of these long tendrils with seaweed hanging off them that would be waved about within the foam. And you can see some of that in some cut. There were some alternative shots that weren't used that were discovered. And then there was a load of behind-the-scenes sort of footage, some cine-film shot of them filming it and sort of wafting the foam about and things, so you can see some of these tendrils. And according to the photo novel description on the BBC site, which shows all the telesnaps, there's a bit towards the end where it says the full weed creature is revealed, but there's no image that actually shows that. So I'm not quite sure how it would have appeared, but I think the artistic license of having these sort of individual weed creatures come out of the foam, kind of, I forgive them for that. Yeah. I think it's worth it, because we've seen so much foam and so many weed tendrils up to that point that we need it escalating a little bit more when he finally defeats the creature at the end.
And one thing, and now that this was a big thing, it's just one of the things you just think about after you've seen it. They didn't really explain where the monster came from. I mean, like, literally I know where it came from. It came from the bottom of the earth or whatever, but like...
The Fury.
Is it alien?
Fury, yeah.
Is it just Earth? Is it... I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's never been, because I mean there's been so many novels, so many audios. As far as I know, there's never been any kind of sequel or prequel to this story explaining, you know, when you've got the minutiae that certainly in the 90s they went into to explain every little part, that there's never been some sort of reference to where this creature came from. I mean, the Doctor has his big book of monsters that he looks up in the TARDIS, and it's got the illustration of how I think it was the 1700s mariners were attacked by a weed creature. But that's about it, really. And the idea that it only becomes sort of evil because it sort of feeds off the consciousness of humans. So it's like... it in itself is just a force of nature, and it's only really given an evil motive by humans, which isn't really expanded upon. Although there is a 10th Doctor novel that I read recently, actually called Wet World, with David Tennant's Doctor, and in that there's a similar creature, which again doesn't have any kind of agency of itself, but once it takes people over, it uses their consciousness and of course is evil, to try and take over and promulgate throughout the galaxy. So I don't know if that maybe was borrowed a little bit. I just
imagine
but there's no real explanation. And a bit like
that has sort of a cutaway of the center of the Earth, and like inside the center is like the Furies, the Silurians, like there's like a dozen things that are just in the Earth anytime you drill that you will.
The Rachnos.
You will inevitably run.
I'm like, wait, what was from the?
Yeah, they're all over the place.
One this reminded me of was Inferno. You know, when they were doing the drilling there. And then...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And I mean that you've got that whole base under siege. You've got that disgruntled, slightly mad leader character who the subordinate has to overrule, just like in Inferno. Yeah, it very much became, very formulaic in a sense.
Our drinking game during this episode was, I would say to the assistants, my wife is ill. And then you would say...
And I would say, I'm in charge here.
Yeah, so anytime he says, my wife is ill, or I'm in charge here, you will probably be blitzed by the end of this episode.
I love the fact as well, though, that he's so stern with him. He's always saying to him, like, no, you can't go home. You've got to work. I don't care. And then he's like, but my wife. And he's like, oh, all right then. He's always giving in to him, and yet never anything.
That was like 10 times. Like, just with this boss, he'll always say no. But you just got to keep going for a little bit longer.
I think there's quite a lot of padding there. I think, for me, the story starts to get a lot better, a lot more pacey, sort of episode 4 time. Actually, around the time that Victoria really starts... I think it's done really beautifully, actually, in the animation when Jamie's sleeping and she has a bit of a breakdown about why she doesn't want to carry on anymore. And they did a really nice sort of moonlit, sort of shadowy effect, which certainly is not what the original looked like. It would have just been a little studio and sort of lit. But I think that's where it picks up a little bit for me with that part.
Well, let's talk Victoria, because one thing we've been bugging you both on and off the mic is companion farewell. So let's go. Jessica, I know you haven't seen, as much as I have, a whole bunch of Victoria, but I know you probably had an opinion of her by the time she ended. But what'd you think of Victoria?
She was pretty screamy, and in this one it served a purpose.
Right.
But then in the featurette that we were looking at, they were saying her agent was probably encouraging her to move on, and she was tired of all of the screaming, and
literally, apparently she had a
lost
hoarse
her
voice
yeah.
to get someone else to scream. But anyway, what would you like to say about the leaving of Victoria both on screen and off screen?
Well, I wouldn't say I've got into trouble before, but somewhat controversially, I'm not a massive fan of Victoria as a character. I never have been. I much prefer... Zoe does sometimes fall into the same trope of being screamy damsel in distress, but certainly in The Mind Dropper, which allegedly may have actually been written for Victoria, which might be the bit where... There's the famous bit where she and the TARDIS explodes and she and Jamie are on the TARDIS console spinning around, and she just goes, "Look, Jamie, the Doctor," and then just screams inexplicably, like 3 big screams. And it's so, for me, out of character for Zoe, but very in character for Victoria. I do kind of like her origin. I like that, she's her introduction, which I'm sure we'll talk about next year when they do the Evil of the Daleks animation, which apparently is on its way. Because I like the fact that she's this prisoner of the Daleks and she's from the Victorian period. There are some really great character moments with her and Troughton, especially in The Tomb of the Cybermen, where the Doctor reassures her and says about his family. But she is very much... that is her role, is to scream and to be needing of rescue. Apparently, just as a little bit of trivia, the original script had them defeating the weed monster with Jamie's bagpipes, which I'm not sure would have been a better idea.
Different.
I think it might have annoyed a lot of Scottish
could have
people.
Played this beautifully, but yes, you're right. The Scottish people would have been. Yeah. I think I may have been insulted on behalf of my ancestors, but yeah, I did find it very strange that she was like, "I don't want to go back on the TARDIS. I don't want to go back to Victorian age. I think I'll stay here at this oil refinery."
Yeah,
They
just
seem like good
randomly
people.
be adopted by these people who, incidentally, the woman, the guy's wife, I've forgotten her name now, but she's never actually met her before because she's been unconscious or hypnotized, and she's just shown up. You're talking about the kind of things that are taken for granted, considering the time, about women's role. If you think about that lady, she first of all, she got stung by this weed. She's been left at home and ignored. Then the Oak and Quill come in and intoxicate her with the gas. She's abducted, she's possessed. She walks into the sea, and when the weed creature is defeated, incidentally, she doesn't drown. Somehow she then comes back, and then they say, right, we're all okay, and then she presumably has to cook a slap-up meal for everyone at the end. Like, give the woman a break.
Well,
It was
I
a
guess
lovely
And then
that's
she
the
has to
last-
adopt a random, apparently teenage girl she has to then look after in her house. I don't know, but
Although they do this big
I think
hand-holding thing. I assume it's a menage a trois waiting to happen here.
well, on that note, a little bit in the sense of implied subtle things. I do quite like the very subtle romantic subplot between her and Jamie,
Yes.
which is hinted at the end of it. I don't know how it was played exactly in the original, but their sort of farewell scene, just the two of them in the evening before they leave on the beach the next day or whenever it is. I quite like that idea that it's almost like she wouldn't stay if he told her that he loved her and he wanted her to stay. But because he doesn't and just kisses her on the cheek, it's like, well, there's no reason for me to continue travelling. I think it's kind of tragic. I don't know if I'm just reading that into it a little bit, but I do like that sort of romance, because unlike a lot of companion farewells, they do actually remember her in the next story. And, most of the time they just move on and forget about them. And you know how this one ends with them being slightly grumpy with each other. The next one begins with them still grumpy, and Jamie is very distraught at the fact that Victoria's had to leave them, and he clearly had strong feelings for her that were never. It was very unrequited, we assume, being children's television in the 60s. But I think what's interesting about Victoria's farewell story, unlike, say, Polly and Ben's, is that she's not just written out. There is a sense, there is a little bit more of a lead into it. I like the fact that she's sort of getting tired with the travelling. She doesn't just randomly go, no, I've had enough at the end, which happened many times before and many times after. I like the little seeds that are planted moving along. And it's kind of believable because she has been so hysterical and terrified through most of her journeys. You believe it, but it does. I don't know if it begins a trait, but it certainly is one where you have the story where the companion, who up to then has been pretty useless, suddenly becoming useful. I mean, where this Victorian young lady, brought up in the etiquette of the mid-Victorian period, has learnt to picklock. I don't think she suddenly is a dab hand with a hair
very
clip.
Charlie-esque.
Yeah. She has a bit more agency, and the fact that I've always kind of thought that her scream being used as a sonic weapon to defeat the monster was kind of clever. I do have some fears that perhaps it's slightly misogynistic. I don't know, but I like that idea of him concentrating her scream. Although, apparently Deborah Watling herself couldn't do the screaming when they recorded it. And I read somewhere, I don't know how true it is, that apparently it was Annika Wills' scream, who played Polly, that they had recorded for The Underwater Menace at some point, and they sort of processed it and used it. But I don't know how true that is.
Well, they said
I
in
read
the
somewhere
featurette that we watched, the
You have to drink every time we say the word featurette, by the way. That's a new thing.
One of the people they interview, she's part of the featurette, but she isn't actually present for the whole gang getting together. I'm trying to remember what her role was. She was part of the show, staff of the show. I don't know if she was some sort of production or scene worker or something.
You would have a production assistant usually, who might be the person or like the floor manager who'd be on the set, and the director who'd be up in the gallery would probably they would talk to them through the headphones, and then they would direct the actors for them. That's what John Nathan Turner used to do before he was producer.
Okay. But yeah.
So maybe she was that.
She talked a little bit about the episode, but she was saying they just go ahead and do that, and she's like, okay, and they just pointed to her.
So she did the screaming and that they recorded.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, right.
That's her claim anyway.
Yeah, I think
well, no, fair enough. It's probably far more likely than it being Annika Wills. I doubt they would have kept that recording necessarily for that use.
Not good at
And of course, talking about Sonics, this is the first story with the sonic screwdriver in. Although I have an incredibly geeky bit of trivia for that, which I don't think a lot of people know. And certainly in the animation, they chose to either ignore or weren't aware of themselves. But the sonic screwdriver is not how it appears in the animation, not in the actual show itself. It was only very recently that a guy who has a blog, what's it called? The Zero Room, I think, is his blog. He did a load of research, as you do, to discover exactly the sonic screwdrivers, because plural, that Patrick Troughton used. And apparently there were 3 each time they appear. The Dominators and War Games, they're actually slightly different. And in this one, I think the intention was and it may even have been selected, was it to be a pen light, like he uses in the War Games. In fact, I think it was the actual one used, because apparently Patrick Troughton dropped it down the pipe when they were filming. And so the actual one that's used was a plastic whistle off Deborah Watling's life jacket that she's got on. So the original sonic screwdriver, despite how it is depicted, is just a little white plastic whistle, which is very disappointing. But allegedly, that was the original screwdriver as used.
That's
in
what I'll
that
get you
one.
for Christmas.
And it is interesting that it is just used to unscrew. It is a screwdriver. They throw some shade, as the kids say in the featurette.
Fraser Hines throws some shade
about the modern use of the screwdriver. So
he's like, now it's just cheating.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my own thoughts on it have been, and I understood why John Nathan Turner destroyed it in Peter Davison's time, because it had become, a way of solving stories. It was a Deus Ex Machina a lot of the time, certainly in Tom Baker's era. But then, conversely, I also understand why Russell T Davies brought it back. I mean, he said, when you want the Doctor moving and you want this fast-pacey show, you don't want everyone stopping at a door for 5 minutes trying to work out how to get it open. Although I suppose 42 with Martha pretty much is that. That's the story. But then saying that, this idea of it being a magic wand that can do everything, certainly in the Matt Smith era, it went too far the other way, kind of thing. But I don't know. Into the murky world of merchandising, I don't know if it might be a little bit of a BBC command. They say, right, you need a new screwdriver, and it must be used because we need to sell X amount of plastic screwdrivers.
That's what always, a bit of a tangent. That's what always struck me about the 12th Doctor Sonic, and maybe because I wasn't a fan of the 12th Doctor initially, but I thought they gave him the new one, and I was like, okay. He never really used it that much, which fine. But then he just went to the sunglasses next, which that's another discussion. But I don't think that's ever, for me, and fans can disagree, never caught on because he never used it, and then he discarded it quickly. So I'm like, I'm not going to buy that one,
Yeah. Well, I think that the story about the sunglasses, the fact that Capaldi himself is very anti, fans having to buy into fandom. I believe he does autographs. I'm not sure, but he doesn't like my collection of plastic that are my figures in my case downstairs, for example. He didn't do a signature edition of that because he doesn't tend to promote that idea that to be a fan you have to buy stuff, and I kind of like that. I mean, having been a fan himself, and also a fan from the period before there was the Star Wars merchandising blitz that taught everyone how to make billions out of these things. I think he liked the idea of kids especially being able to pick things up and, this is my sonic screwdriver or something. So I think the rationale behind the sunglasses for him was that, all kids have a pair of sunglasses, or if, they're very cheap, and everyone can pretend it's a sonic sunglasses. So I think that was the way he brought it in. I think it was his idea. The new screwdriver that he had, I think probably was the BBC sort of edict of you need to have a new toy out for Christmas kind of thing, because notice it was introduced right at the end of a season, so he could then use it on Christmas Day, and although they could get it out ahead for the shops and all that. But I don't tend to look into all the merchandise side of things, so I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I imagine it was
not to go further
something
down a
like
tangent
that.
rabbit hole, but I don't know if it was Doctor Who Monthly or celestial toy room or something. But in the past, 3 months, I remember reading an article that apparently Peter, when he was younger, he and a friend broke into, I don't know, Doctor Who set or filming or something. Yeah.
Well, kind of, yeah. No, it was in Doctor Who magazine a couple of months ago. There was a feature because I can't remember all the details now, which I'll have to research them again in the future. But Peter Capaldi was either the joint president of a Doctor Who appreciation. It wasn't the Doctor Who Appreciation Society that came later, but he was the head of the Doctor Who fan club when he was young, and so was his friend or something. And they managed to get on to... I don't think they snuck on. I think they did actually manage, because in their role, I think they did, his friend was a guy who had a fanzine, and he got an interview with John Pertwee, I think, and so they managed to go on to set when they were filming Death to the Daleks or something in 1970, what was that, 4, something like that. So yeah, he was definitely much he was in there, at the beginning.
Okay, but back to the Fury from the Deep. No, it's
climbing out of the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I do like. I do like the idea that they use Victoria's sort of screaming as an aspect of it. I think it had become an in-joke anyway, because as I say, that wasn't in the original script. The original script was Jamie's bagpipes, but then they said, no, I don't like that, so we changed it. And then I think it was the production team rather than the writer who may have changed it to Victoria's Scream. And I think Patrick Troughton had an affectionate nickname for her, which was Old Leather Lungs, because she was one of the pros of screaming. And I think at that time, being the way movies and TV was, and a young actress, as one of her desirable characteristics that they have was to be a good screamer. And I think Deborah Watling was known as one of the best screamers in the business or something.
It would be.
As an actress, I'm so inherently bothered by this.
It would be as if
I know. Well, you better not look at what Deborah Watling went on to do later on then.
Oh, really?
That kind of male gaze kind of thing. Yeah, she got a whole new... She went on and did a World War II drama, if you want to call it that, called Danger UXB, where she was known as Naughty Norma. So, and those, some of the photography of her from the time, I think it's ironic that things like Oak and Quill, breathing their gas, we can still see that clip because it was cut out in the Australian censors, cut it out. But then you see it some of the way that women were dressed and depicted in these things, and it seems like a complete contradiction, hypocrisy in how prim and proper they were expected to be, I suppose, because sometimes they were quite revealing, and I suppose that might be partly to do with fashion. I mean, you look at Katie Manning in Doctor Who, for example. I mean, some of those skirts are just obscene, as we'd say at school, that she wore. But I don't know. It just seems a bit of an irony of the time, really. Yeah. Especially for someone who grew up in the Victorian period as well.
I think using her scream as the weapon would be as if Perry's spandex top was used to defeat a monster during the,
or her scream.
Yeah.
or something else.
Well, I mean that's the thing about Perry as well, is that she's kind of reduced in her television stories, at least, to every other villain seems to be lusting after her as a sort of... It kind of works in Caves of Androzani because it's very much a pastiche on Phantom of the Opera, and and how he worships her beauty. But then after a while, the Borad in Time Lash wants her, and everyone wants a piece of her. Shock Eye wants to eat her, literally. They do become very literally objectified.
We have finished our third Doctor watch for the first time, but what do you think, Jessica? Would you sort of think about revisiting?
I heard,
Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I always like Troughton and Hines together. I think they're a lot of fun. This would have been an interesting episode for the third Doctor, though. All of the action helicopter. He would have been flying
the helicopter. Yeah. He would have known how to fly the helicopter.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't think Pertwee would have allowed himself to be depicted as not competent with controls.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there was the one point where the helicopter lifts off, and then a lady in a car or some sort of car boat or something also takes off, and I was like, this is a Pertwee episode right here.
The helicopter would have had Who 3 on the
Yeah. He would have called it Bertha or something. Yeah.
But yeah, I always, and this is in no way a criticism, but I think the second Doctor serials, and maybe it's just the ones I've seen recently, tend to be very frenetic. Again, compared to the third Doctor, where it's usually one person at a time, and someone's in control. But like second Doctor, it's like I like to look at the scripts where it says like you have like in the technical business we have the dual convo on the script page, like you have like 5 of them at the same time where everyone's like I don't know, and that just seems to be that feeling here is that everything's like out of control and frenetic, and we're screaming and we're panicking and we're running, and that's always seems to be very second Doctor.
He's our only hope.
Yes.
I think that also might be. In the sense of how it then comes across on screen, might be a product of the way that production, certainly the stuff shot on set on video, was recorded, because you're kind of in a midway period here between the way that early Doctor Who was shot, William Hartnell, where the whole episode was recorded pretty much in an evening, and there was no location footage and 2 recording breaks. By this point, we've moved on a little bit, but essentially, and pretty much continued until the 80s, that was still the kind of the process of rehearsing during the week and then filming on a Friday night kind of thing. And I think that because of the expense of filming, the technology that they had, there was that sense of getting it all done. Whereas I think with Pertwee, certainly in Pertwee's first season, there's a lot more location work. They're shot a lot more like films with single cameras, and so perhaps that changes it up a little bit, because I think, there are points, certainly, you can see throughout Troughton's era and certainly Hartnell's era, where people, speak before they should speak and then have to backtrack, like you'd see on a stage play or something, that hasn't been rehearsed that much. You've got people coming in too quickly, and talking over each other. And maybe that frenetic atmosphere that comes out of it might be as a result of those production sort of restraints in a way.
And I didn't realize, because, I'm not as versed, for some reason that Mr. Quill soundless scream is such like a gif or a meme in my mind that I didn't realize I don't think I even knew if it was Doctor Who, to tell you the truth. But I'd seen that look before on the internet. I didn't realize
there's something about it though, isn't there?
Creepy.
It's simultaneously ridiculous and silly, but also kind of freaky as well, and that makes it freakier. I mean, they were very much based on Laurel and Hardy visually, if you couldn't tell. You've got the short fat one and the tall thin one, but because apparently I think Pemberton had met them, and so he used that as inspiration, but they're not very much like them. And I always think Mr. Oak, always the little one, he reminds me of the guy from the Munsters.
Grandpa
guy. Yeah, they're great. I don't know. It's the hair maybe and the round.
Well, we thought
face.
And again we forget names. The Dutch consultant was very Frankenstein monster in the animation.
Oh, Van Lutyens. Yeah. Yeah, he's quite. Yeah, he looks kind of imposing and big, doesn't he? Yeah. But Oak and Quill, I don't know. They're always kind of. They should have been in it more, I think. I mean, they're always sort of lurking in the background, and they sort of add that in with the animation as well. You sort of spot them there. But I think they could have had more of a lead. Maybe there could have been some sort of confrontation where they spoke the thoughts of the weed creature a bit more with the Doctor. There could have been a bit of a face-off. I think if it had been a Pertwee story, maybe it would probably have happened, because you need to have, the Pertwee, the third Doctor, having some sort of moral discussion with the villain at some point. But I do like that little bit when they go around her house and he's got that creepy. He's so posh. Most of the characters in this, okay, they've all got generally received pronunciation because it's a BBC show from the 60s, but he's out of time. There's kind of a strange sort of almost gothic quality, and the fact that they never give him first names. I am Mr. Oak and here is Mr. Quill. And yeah, although strangely in the I don't know why, there's a few things in the animation that are different. For example, because when I watch these, I like to sort of glance down at the telesnaps as I go and see whether they've recreated the image or whether they've taken any artistic license, And one thing I noticed strangely was a lot of the shots were flipped. The positions of characters were flipped. So if there was a shot where, say, the Doctor was on the left and Van Lutyens was on the right, they'd flipped it round. And I'm not quite sure why they did that. And the other thing is later on when Robson is in his room, sort of having his nightmares and things. In the original, it's Mr. Quill, the tall one, who's outside at his door. But in this, they made it Mr. Oak. And it's kind of strange. Like, why would you do that? I don't quite know why they would. Maybe they had more, I don't know, animations for him or something. But I think they captured the creepiness, especially like the weird smile that Mr. Quill did. They had quite a few shots they got out of that one.
Yeah.
Big teeth and all that. I think the big letdown generally of the story is the fact that, similar to Faceless Ones, there's kind of a very quick resolution. And I think, unlike probably any other Troughton story, no one dies in the story
Everybody
at all, as far
lives.
as we know, including the monster. You know, even the monster itself retreats back to the sea, and we're just like, oh no, it won't bother anyone
It'll be
again.
fine.
We're going to put a fence up,
won't it?
some yellow tape.
We're still going to be,
No.
But you see, Mr. Oak, Mr. Quill, and you never see them returned. They're very much like a side characters, and I think they're too. Maybe their importance to the story is sort of overblown in our minds, perhaps because the only real extended clip we have of the Faceless Ones is the part when they enter her room and breathe the gas on her with the creepy music. So perhaps that's amplified their importance in the history of the story, and like you say, become a meme and things like that. But I do kind of, I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity there to perhaps flesh out their characters.
It actually seemed at the end, and this isn't a complaint, but just watching it for the first time, or at least for the first time in a long time, certainly because of the animation, that the ending almost seemed like extended. Like, I thought it was going to end quicker than it did because I wasn't looking at the time, and so I'm like, I almost thought it was going to end on a kind of like tropish American horror movie of like, or is it still out there? Like some shot would come with like a weed still waving, or it's just something. Because I'll tell you who I actually,
which is how Tomb of the Cybermen ends, with the cyber arm clutching at the end.
Because actually I had
like
suspicions about a character. Because again, don't know names. The guy at the keyboard, the control guy, the guy in the Davros chair, which I thought was weird. But anyway, because at the confrontation in the animation, at least, the second Doctor's like, press the button. The guy doesn't press the button because it looks like he's scared. But like, what if that was a put on? Because then at the end, he's kind of still at the chair, and I'm like, he's still kind of. I feel like maybe he was in charge the whole time. So.
Yeah, it would have been a good little extra twist as such, and perhaps would have made Victoria's leaving at the end in some spin-off material. She could have been fighting the weed creature again, but having a bit more of a lead role rather than just a thing to be used in a way. But no, you're right. That's one thing I did notice, that because you have this very quick resolution, and then you have, quite unusually, especially for the time, a bit of an extended farewell and a little bit of character to business. You have that little bit where you see the characters afterwards, and the Doctor actually stays behind and sort of doesn't just sling his hook kind of thing straight away. And the farewell on the beach. And the weird sort of strange TARDIS thing. There's the one other thing you can see, which is they reuse the shot randomly of the TARDIS landing physically like a rocket, like one of those SpaceX rockets, on the water and somehow floating. They reuse that shot in the War Games when they're trying to escape from the Time Lord, so you can see that shot that way. I think the actual thing was a little police box model that they had on piano wire that they lowered from a helicopter, probably the ones they were using at the other point. But I suppose that kind of links in a little bit with David Tennant shooting off like a rocket when Runaway Bride, I think it is, at the end. He shoots off actually vertically, like I suppose a lot of people that hadn't seen Doctor Who kind of assumed that's what the TARDIS did. But yeah, no, I do think, I mean, for the time, despite how underwritten Victoria is in most of her stories, she is very pathetic, in the literal sense that she sort of she provokes a kind of a pity and an emotion. You sympathise for her and you feel that she's vulnerable, and that in itself is questionable. But at least she is fleshed out a little bit more, and she doesn't just meet someone and fall in love and go, "Oh, I'm off to get married," like so many companions before and later do. She does go off on her own, and her story is sort of taken up in another straight to video drama
don't do this to us.
of the 90s, but but unlike that one, Air's Own Solution, this was actually novelised as well. And I haven't actually seen the film, but I've read the book, and it has the Brigadier and Kate Stewart when she's younger. And it has, Victoria, and it has the Great Intelligence and the Yetis in it again. So it's kind of an interesting... I don't think the drama is really... It doesn't live up to the ambition of the plot, but the book is quite good. And she doesn't actually become like the hero who has to save the day. She actually becomes sort of manipulated and controlled by the Great Intelligence and becomes almost the villain in the story. So it's an interesting little sequel in a way.
Better or worse than the Liz Shaw?
Better.
Okay. That's all works.
It has Yeti and Nicholas Courtney in it. So.
You're right. It actually acknowledges Doctor Who properties. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been talking for a while, so I guess let's sort of conclude talking about sort of the meta aspects, or at least outside the story presented. What did you think of the animation, Jessica?
There were places where it felt quite stilted. I don't think I liked it as much as I've liked some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, we should note this was a COVID production, so I don't know if that... Well, I mean, I know it did affect things, but I don't know if it affected them more than, in a perfect world it would have. It's going to sound like a critique. I don't mean it to. Look, it's an animated Second Doctor. I'm not complaining. We got it. It's fine.
Where's my Marco Polo?
Well,
That's
yes.
what I want to know.
But it did seem a little cartoony. Is how some of the people look sometimes. And I don't know if I can really spot the difference or tell you why. And then there were times where the two-dimensionality seemed very, I don't know... And again, I'm trying to remember all the other animations, and I can't, of course, in my head. There wasn't that much three-dimensionality that they were trying to do. It was I remember the near one of the scenes. I don't know if it was episode 5 or something. They're all lined up, looking at the computer screen. Everyone has to be in a line because they can't animate anything mixed. But anyway, I don't know. Again, it's not a critique, just something I noted based on past productions. I figured that we'd.
Well, I believe that this is a different production company than the one who worked on the Faceless ones, and they got a slightly different style to it. They're obviously not using the same... I can't remember the term now, but the same... they have a prepared set of facial expression, Patrick Troughton, head sculpts and things like that they've done for other productions. These are newer ones done for this production. And I think... I'm not sure, but I would be willing to bet that they probably spent less money on the visuals of this than they did on the Faceless ones, guessing by the fact that they had enough money left over to actually do some bonus features, whereas they didn't so much for the previous one. But that's pure supposition on my part. I think you're right. One of the things, and I said when you kindly invited me on here before, that I really liked about the Faceless ones, and also indeed really liked about Power of the Daleks, was how they recreated the backgrounds, the sets. And whereas I think these were quite atmospheric, certainly with the lighting, there was a lot less detail, and they didn't seem as three-dimensional as some of those sets that they had built for previous ones. But I think you're right. There are noticeable differences, but I think you kind of get used to it, really, after a while.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you watch this one in black and white again?
Of course, Richard.
You
know how I roll.
Well, you see, I watched it in colour again. I know, but I've seen the telesnaps in black and white, many times, and I was just sort of interested because I thought, will that, because it doesn't look like the original for me anymore, and I don't really I don't really try and imagine. I kind of think, these people have worked on this, and I kind of want to see their work, and I actually in color, I thought it was quite good. Certainly with, as I say, with the lightings, there was a lot of color in the lights and color shifts between lighting of different parts of the image, which I quite liked as well. It wasn't just sort of flat, all lit, like, you know, they actually thought about the sort of more cinematic lighting, I think. And I think that was enhanced in colour, whereas I think it would be less impressive in black and white. Certainly that scene, as I say, when Victoria is in the bunk room and Jamie's sleeping, I think that looks quite good, certainly in colour. So I don't know. I did get the special edition re-release of Power of the Daleks, and that only has the black and white version on. So I don't know if I'm being irreverent or something of the source material. But
No, but I have to admit, though, I don't know. You know, there's limits where my fandom will go. But, like, you can't re-release something I just bought 3 years ago. So, I mean, you can, but I'm not going to buy it. So.
Yeah, I thought that at first, yeah. But I think that the reason why they did that was because there were quite a few things that they had done incorrectly, right. Certainly with the regeneration at the start and things like that. So, yeah, that was why they did that. But, no, I understand that. I sympathise with that entirely, having bought so many versions of Star Wars over the years. And they're better picture quality, but they always... having to watch... I'm sorry to completely take on another tangent for a second, but the bit with... the bit where Greedo now says McClunky, that's just like you've made it like I should not be laughing at one of the best films ever made.
No, I have a friend, Drew Stewart, who I don't know if you can want to look up his Twitter. He's literally made it his life mission to berate, in a good way, berate Disney for not releasing the original movie.
I'm amazed they haven't. I'm really amazed they haven't.
And he's like, and so when McClunky, like he hit, like that was him at midnight. He did like a screen. I think it was in Wired magazine or something. It was in a big thing that he wrote up comparing, like, because he does like the what's different in every movie. Like he does all that. And so yes, and I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I read his whole thing about his screed, but in a good way, about, you know, you've done this. Why don't you release the original movie?
Yeah.
Again, as a release, make it an option. But so he's that's his life's mission.
Yeah, it is bizarre. I mean, at least like for Doctor Who, there have been stories released on DVD where, albeit not with the same expense that were put into the Star Wars re-releases, but they've, you know, sometimes tweaked a special effect or they've put some CGI kind of things into it. Certainly, the Time Warrior benefits from that. There's an optional special effect where the castle blows up at the end. It's not very convincing in the original version, but they put an extra explosion in. But they're optional. You know, you can watch the original and the one with the thing. So that's something I think that the BBC, or at least the people in charge of the DVDs, have always understood, that fans are purists and they will want the original version, warts and all. But it's nice to have a little version, which is why, you know, it's quite good that these DVD releases have a black and white animated version, a colour animated version, and a sort of telesnap reconstruction. You know, they understand the fan mind far better than some of these big multinational companies with these billion-dollar properties do.
Of course, they've had more time to learn the fan mind.
Well, that's true. That's true. I think you know, there are cash grabs with releases for popular stuff, and then there are things which are genuine labours of love for the people involved. I mean, I can think of, like, for example, the Next Generation Blu-ray release from a few years back. For me, anyway, seemed like that, where they had to, obviously they'd scan in all the film to get the Blu-ray, but of course all the effects had been put on later on the video, so they had to recreate those effects, didn't they? And they could have gone crazy and done something that was far beyond the capabilities perhaps of the time, but as far as I know, I mean, I might be saying something completely blasphemous now, but as far as I could tell, they generally kind of recreated the visuals, albeit with, you know, in high definition, as had been in the original 90s and late 80s
in
versions.
fact, if I remember correctly, the only complaint I can remember about the special effects was actually the reverse. that they didn't fix things we knew to be wrong. There were, and I can't remember the episode, but there's some episode where the phasers on the Enterprise come out from the bottom of the ship. And they're like, well, look, if you're doing the effects again, can't you fix it so it comes from the phaser array? And they're like, well, we didn't know. And we're like...
Yeah, well, I suppose in that case, you've got kind of a conflicting thing. But that's the same with Star Wars. I mean, there's so many things that they didn't fix for years, and they threw in all the random stuff. Like Darth Vader had a white lightsaber in one shot for years, and they never seemed to fix that. And all kinds of things. So, you know, I mean, that's when they're doing this, certainly when they're doing these animations, you know, there's that temptation, I suppose, to, you know, really do something completely different. Obviously, they've got to bear in mind the audience out there that they can't necessarily make them purely for collectors, I suppose. You know, they've got to have some broad appeal, which probably is why there's black and white and colour versions and things like that on there. So, you know, the temptation to completely change something, you know, you could argue that they do that a little bit, like with the weed and this one coming out of the sea with the helicopter. But it doesn't radically alter the source material as such. You know, it's not like, you know, inserting someone saying McClunky, you know. But, yeah, there must be a temptation sometimes, though, to do something... it'll be interesting to see when they do Evil of the Daleks, because in the last two stories of that, they go back to Skaro, and you go to the Dalek city, and they going across you know, bridges and ramps with all Daleks driving around. You've got the Emperor Dalek in its throne room, and of course in the original, whilst, you know, the models and the visuals of that were impressive for the time, they wouldn't be like what you'd see, say, in a Peter Capaldi Dalek story. So it'll be interesting to see how they balance how they visualise that between what it's supposed to look like and what it actually looked like, you know. But I've got faith that they'll find a happy medium, you know, between the two.
Awesome. All right, Jessica, final thoughts about Fury from the Deep?
Yeah. Nick Fury wasn't in it at all.
I know. Nor there were few Greek references.
There were not as many Greek references as I expected.
The Furies.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
So it sounds like you were disappointed largely.
I was largely disappointed. Nobody in an eye patch. I don't even know why you wasted your money.
Yeah, I enjoyed it again without having seen it. You know, it's new Doctor Who to me, and so if I haven't seen it in a while, and of course it's restored, and it's full glory as much as it can be. But I enjoyed it. I think there were times where you're talking about Richard about being loyal to the original. There were times in maybe in episode 2 or 3 where I'm like, this is the audio, and I know they're being, you know, this is what happened, but like I would have cut this like dead silence, you know, and I don't know what you do in its place, but I'm like, you don't have to be that faithful. But anyway.
Well, and there was actually one moment, and I think it might have been in that nighttime scene when Jamie is sleeping, and Victoria picks up a glass and drinks, and I was like, this is really random. And then it makes the clunk sound, and I was like, oh, okay. So they had to do something, but there's no, that was...
Yeah. I think a part of that, I think you're right. I mean, there will be parts, I think, that drag just because of the way that the production was filmed, you know, and also the need to pad stories out to fit the episode count, because in those days, you know, a story, they didn't say, right, this story, I'm writing this story and it's got to 6 episodes and this is how long it is, and they'll say, right, we'll make that. They would commission the number of episodes they needed to fill was there before they made the commission. So sometimes people will go, right, I've got this great idea, and then when they actually come to write it, it doesn't really fill those 6 episodes, and so you get those padding, you get those running up and down corridors, you get him saying about his wife is ill so many times over and over again.
Can I see her? No.
I'm in charge here.
No.
But at the same time, I think there is a little bit of an issue there with the fact that the animation doesn't truly capture the acting that perhaps may have been going on, the facial acting, especially with someone like Troughton. I think they've done a good image of him, but then no one's ever going to be. It's like Patrick Troughton's Doctor has always famously been very difficult to write for, because so much of Troughton's Doctor is about his performance and his face. He has had such a fantastic face. and so and he was very, very good at facial acting. You know, he was a proper TV star. Like most actors had done theatre or things like that. He was there at the inception of television. He'd done it for years and years, live television in those days. So he knew how to perform for a camera on TV. And I don't think the animation is ever going to be able, with the best will in the world, be able to capture that kind of visual interest that a good television or film actor can do with their face. So that might be an element of it. You know, it's a very subtle thing, but without being able to see it, you know, it's very, very visual.
Yes. And Richard, what are your final thoughts? And then why don't you share where folks can find you and any projects you may be working on?
Fair enough. Well, you know, I mean, for me, I most of the time, Fury from the Deep for me has been an audio experience, and it was only really on my rewatch that I did a few years back where I went through everything in order, where I actually sat down and listened to it with the telesnaps. So it was never one that was particularly prominent when I thought about Doctor Who. You know, I thought about stories that were extant that I had that I could watch easily. But I think it's got some things going for it. It is a bit run of the mill. It is a bit formulaic, even for the time, because as I say, you know, they'd settled into that groove, that formula. But it, you know, as another example of sort of the proto-unit Pertwee era story, I think it does quite well, and there's some good performances in it. I think it's a little bit too long. I think it should have been about 4 episodes, but I think you can say that for a lot of 6-episode Doctor Who stories from the period. It's very much one of those ones which even I find it difficult to sit and watch the whole thing through back to back. But of course, it's one of those things that you've got to remember wasn't intended to be seen that way, sort of week to week. It's some missed opportunities. There's some things that are not so great, but I do think it's one of the better Troughton era stories, and it's a shame that we can't really see it. I think it would probably be more highly regarded or more remembered if we had it. It's certainly better than the Dominators, which came the next year, which we do have all of, and I would swap it in a heartbeat for something like Fury from the Deep, partly because of its views, but that's for another day, perhaps. Yeah, so, you know, and I'm glad we've got it. As always with these animations, you know, it's nice to be filling those gaps in the library, and again, it's always appreciated that there's a lot of love and attention and knowledge put into these things. It isn't someone who's just come in and gone, right, there's the story, and with all the enthusiasm of the world has created something. This is made and directed by people who really know their stuff and have got little details right, or made decisions where they have changed things that still aren't, you know, offensive to us hardcore fans in some way, you know. So yeah, it's a nice little addition. And thinking about the Pertwee era, my next companion video will be about the Brigadier, because he was the winner of the poll on Patreon by quite a margin. Actually, I realised that I had omitted him from the previous poll, which is probably why he got so many votes this time round. And I think the reason why I omitted it because there is some controversy. People go, "Well, the Brigadier's not a companion. You know, he's a recurring character." But I thought, well, come on. I mean, the rule used to be, before the modern series, that if they travelled in the TARDIS, then they were a companion. And the Brigadier has travelled in the TARDIS a couple of times, so he kind of counts in my mind. But I won't be working on that just yet, because I'm currently really trying to do my best to realise, I know this is quite an anticipated one, but I'm obviously working on the David Tennant era of my main series. So that will be coming up. I mean, I don't like to. A few people have said we've got a rough date when it's going to be ready. The problem is, because it's not my full-time job, although I'd love it to be, I can't always promise, and I've been quite busy with work and all those kinds of things recently. But it's certainly, you know, it's continuing apace, and I do hope I do justice, because I know next to Tom Baker, this is probably going to be one of my more scrutinised videos. So I want to try and cover everything comprehensively, but still make it entertaining, because it's such a period of Doctor Who. There's so much I could talk about, you know, and it's where it exploded internationally. Really, yeah. So it's judging it. What should I talk about? What should perhaps I leave for later? What do I need to cover? What is the sort of the through line for this one? I've got. I'm right. I actually posted a picture on Twitter. A request really on Twitter, because one of the things I really need for the video is a picture of David Tennant when he's young. Now, you wouldn't think that's difficult to find because he's such a well-known actor and people really love him and probably have shrines to him in their houses and things like that. But actually, it's very, very difficult to find a picture of him when he's a young boy, and that's fair enough. He's, if he wants to be private and all that kind of thing. But for a key thing, certainly for the beginning of my video, I really need a picture of him preferably when he's a young child, because that's when he was a fan, obviously, of Doctor Who. So anyway, that's what I'm working on now. And as I mentioned, I put out a request for anyone who may have found a picture of young David Tennant on my Twitter, because I finally decided to join the Twitterverse after some lovely subscriber shared my last companion video about Jamie with Fraser Hines himself. And he enjoyed it, so I was very flattered by that, and I thought, right, I suppose I better have a Twitter presence. I bet Clever Dick Films on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us once again, Richard.
Always.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's always lovely.
And until next time, enjoy watching the many adventures of the Doctors, animated or not, in all of time and space.
This is BBC Television.